most people educated in Britain believe that the First World War was caused by, or the catalyst at least, was the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. Well, Ruchti, of course, realized that this was the myth that was being put out, and so he wrote an academic paper, which never really saw the light of day, but Steiner picked it up, and he quoted from it in a book, or in a series of lectures, actually, which emerged as a book entitled The Karma of Untruthfulness. And the full quote is, "History cannot be permanently falsified. The myth cannot stand up to the scrutiny of scientific research. The sinister web will be brought into the light and torn to pieces, however artfully it has been spun." And I think that was extremely prescient. That was written in 1915. But let's take a look at some of the stuff that has occurred in the meantime. William Engdahl mentioned Zbigniew Brzezinski, and he was certainly quoting and paraphrasing Zbigniew Brzezinski during the course of his presentation. Now, I referenced Zbigniew Brzezinski in my AV3 presentation, and I referenced the book that Brzezinski wrote in 1969, published in 1970, called Between Two Ages, the Technotronic Era. And, I mean, although Brzezinski made a lot of extremely prescient observations in that book, one of the points that he made was that the challenge in the future was for governments to keep humanity locked into consumerist materialism and prevent them from finding out who they really are. So here's a guy, writing. He was in his 40s then. He's in his 80s now. He was in his 40s, and he was then making this observation. So he was obviously well aware that this was a threat to the powers that be way back then. Now, he's also, he was a protege of the Rockefellers, and he's the founder of the Trilateral Commission. He's the guy who identified Jimmy Carter, introduced Jimmy Carter to the Rockefellers. The Rockefellers funded Jimmy Carter's run for president. Now, he was out of favor during the Clinton years, so he went back into academia. But he was, during the Clinton years, whilst he was in academia, he was doing something else. He was nurturing one of his students at Columbia University. And that student was a guy called Barack Obama. Brzezinski had effectively nurtured Obama for 20 plus years. There's no accident that Obama comes into the White House. But in the Clinton years, Brzezinski wrote a book called The Grand Chessboard, where he talked about the geopolitics of the 1990s and the post-collapse of the Berlin Wall and the Soviet Empire. And he was making the observation that the US had never had a better opportunity to establish total domination. And he made the observation, he said, the public supported America's engagement in World War II largely because of the shock effect of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. Now, he was making that observation because a little less than a year previously, Bill Clinton had gone as far as he probably dared to issue an apology. And that apology was made to the admiral, well, posthumously, made to the family of the admiral who was in charge of Pearl Harbor on that fateful day, December the 7th, 1941. And that admiral was Admiral Husband E. Kimmel. Now, Kimmel was kept out of the loop because Roosevelt knew the Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor. Why did he know it? Because they were baited into attacking Pearl Harbor. They were baited into attacking Pearl Harbor to give America the excuse to enter into the Second World War. And Kimmel's predecessor actually caught wind of what was happening because he was being kept out of the loop. And so he asked all the right questions and was quietly promoted away from the Pacific Fleet. Kimmel was put in his place, and Kimmel didn't ask the questions because he was really very sort of new in the job. And in the subsequent inquiries, he was accused of being a drunkard, an alcoholic. He was actually accused of hosting an orgy on the night of December the 6th, 1941. He was never allowed to attend any of the three inquiries into the Pearl Harbor attacks. He spent his life, and I have the documentation, he spent the rest of his life actually trying to find out who it was who made these accusations at the hearings. But he was never able to do so. So he died a broken man. But Clinton went as far as he dared in 1996 to offering an apology and saying that husband Kimmel was an all-American hero. And this was his counterpart, this was his counterpart in the military. This is interesting. Let's go back this way. Okay. This was his counterpart in the army, Walter C. Short, and he only came out of it slightly better off. But this was a classic case of history, again, being manipulated to enable the US government to establish their agenda. Now, Brzezinski also made the observation that whilst America could only really establish itself as a superpower, his term, superpower, if it actually did so militarily, because he observed that, in his opinion, by 1997, it had lost the initiative to achieve this diplomatically. So he made the observation, he said, moreover, as America becomes an increasingly multicultural society, it may find it more difficult to fashion a consensus on foreign policy issues, except in the circumstance of a truly massive and widely perceived direct external threat. 1997. A couple of years later, there was a document produced titled Strategic Energy Policy Challenges for the 21st Century. And this was labeled as a report of independent task force sponsored by James A. Baker, the James A. Baker Institute for Public Policy of Rice University. Well, there's nothing independent about this at all, because James A. Baker III definitely ain't independent, and Rice University is an oil university based in Houston, Texas. But then, of course, the third party to this was the Council on Foreign Relations. And in this report, it said the American people need to know about this situation, i.e. the fact that they were allegedly going to need control of overseas oil to maintain their lifestyle. They need to be told as well that there are no easy or quick solutions of today's energy problems. The president has to begin educating the public about this reality and start building a broad base of popular support for the hard policy choices ahead. In other words, aggressive warfare. And as William touched on today, and I've been speaking on for the past 4 or 5 years now, the whole hypothesis of peak oil is a total political construct. Now, I'm not for one moment suggesting that we continue extracting 90 million barrels of hydrocarbons a day and burning them, because there are alternatives available right now. But this is the way in which the global economy is controlled and, of course, is taxed. Now, the Project for New American Century was also referenced by William Engdahl. This is a group known as PNAC. And PNAC published a report, which I'm going to reference in a second, but the members of PNAC are very interesting. Not least, this is the guy, John Bolton. I mean, this guy is a real piece of work. He was the PNAC chairman, and then he was appointed as US ambassador to the United Nations, and he immediately set about trying to hijack the United Nations and effectively make them ineffectual. But the other members of PNAC, I'm sure you're going to recognize some of these guys, huh? Paul Wolfowitz, Dick Cheney, Louis Libby, John Negroponte, oh my gosh, Rumsfeld, Mr. Aspartame, Mr. Bird Flu, Mr. Tamiflu, Mr. Swine Flu, unbelievable. And this guy, Rabbi Dov Zakheim, need I say more? Now, on the day before 9/11, Donald Rumsfeld and his comptroller at the Pentagon, Rabbi Dov Zakheim, announced to the media the day before 9/11. The day before 9/11, they announced that the Pentagon cannot account for $2.3 trillion. $2.3 trillion. Now, back then, that was a lot of money. Nowadays, it's worth about $5. Now, normally, if you're in PR, you know that if you've got something that you need to announce, you have to announce, but actually you don't really want it to get mega media coverage, you announce it on a Friday. September the 10th was a Monday. So it's pretty much guaranteed that it would be in the media unless something else happened. But how could he have known? I mean, incredible, isn't it? But that wasn't the only remarkable announcement that appeared in the media the day before 9/11, because this one also appeared. It was a press release. And it appeared in the Washington Times. And it said, this is an extract from the full report, and it was a report issued by the US Army's School of Advanced Military Studies, i.e. some serious strategists. And in this report it said, Mossad are ruthless and cunning, having the capability to target US forces and make it look like a Palestinian Arab act. The day before 9/11. I suppose the only surprising thing is that the alleged perpetrators of 9/11 didn't have British passports. So I'm sure David Miliband would have obliged. Then, of course, in the Rebuilding America's Defenses document, which was the PNAC document, published in September of 2000, exactly 1 year before 9/11, there is a remarkable statement on page 51. And that statement says, further, the process of transformation, i.e. America effectively establishing itself as the global hegemony, even if it brings revolutionary change, is likely to be a long one, absent some catastrophic event like a new Pearl Harbor. That was published in September of 2000, so that was 2 months before the elections in the US, and obviously 4 months before George Bush was sworn in on the White House lawn. And the moment he was appointed, out of the 27 people who put their signatures to this document, 10 of them were immediately appointed into George Bush's government. So this document was the blueprint, spelling out what the strategy was for the Bush years in the White House. And this goes back to the point I've made many, many times, that these guys, they work on the basis that they have to put out in the public domain exactly what their agenda is. They don't necessarily have to sort of splash it on the front pages, but they need to put it out there. And then when there's no reaction, that is effectively a mandate to pursue that agenda. So, the onus is on us. They're telling us what they're going to do. The onus is on us then to challenge them. And of course, the following day, they got their new Pearl Harbor, the most brilliant piece of Hollywood theater, which is exactly what it was. It was Hollywood theater. And tragically, 3,000, just over 3,000 people lost their lives that day. But maybe some of those who allegedly lost their lives didn't. Because I have to tell you that I've taken a look at the passenger lists of the planes that allegedly flew into the buildings and the Pentagon and crashed in Pennsylvania. And the list of passengers is really quite remarkable. Because you'd expect to see a pretty cross-section of the business community on any plane. First of all, these planes are only about 30% full, which is very unusual at that time in the morning in the US. But many of these people were working for companies like Boeing, for Raytheon, for IBM, for Lockheed. Now, in the US, there is a law that allows the government to sequester their citizens who they believe to have unique skills that are essential for national security. Now, we know that the phone calls were a complete crock from the plane, and we know that there's a sound engineer who has done some analysis of the phone calls, and on one of the phone calls, allegedly, which was made, but didn't come from the plane, but when he raised the sound levels, he was speaking, I think it was to his wife, and she was explaining that they were on the plane and it had been hijacked. And then just before he hung up, he heard, or she hung up, What this sound engineer heard in the background was somebody say to her, "You did good. You did real good." And then the phone line went dead. So let's consider the possibility. Actually, those people who were allegedly on the planes weren't actually killed, but they were sequestered. And then once they were sequestered, they were given a choice. Yeah? You're dead. What are you going to do? Work for us in Black Ops? Or take the other option? But either way, you will never see your family again. And of course we say, surely they wouldn't do that. Oh, please, please, these guys are capable of anything. This is an interesting shot from 9/11. See this here? Looks like a warhead, doesn't it? Something plowed through the Trade Center. And actually in the next shot, I think you can see the signature. There's a trail here. It's not so clear on this shot, but there's a trail here, which is the classic signature of depleted uranium. So it was a depleted uranium warhead used to penetrate through the building. This was pure theater. This is like napalm, this alleged aircraft fuel. It was purely for the camera, because clearly burning outside the building, it's not doing any damage inside, is it? And yet, allegedly, the towers collapsed because of fires. We know that wasn't the case. But forget the Twin Towers for a second. This is of course, this is the point that really should wake people up. This Boeing, the official story is that it was flying at 530 miles an hour at a height of 4'6". This is your captain speaking. It's totally impossible, because any physicist who studied aeronautics will tell you, because they told me, that there is a thing called ground effect, and at that speed the plane would actually be sucked into the ground. But as we see from the photographs from the Pentagon, the lawn wasn't touched at all. There's not a mark on the lawn. Now this is a photograph that was taken by a passerby, and what's interesting here is you notice that the roof line is intact. Completely intact. But the plane has disappeared. The building's on fire, but the plane has completely disappeared, not a mark on the lawn, and the building line is intact. It didn't actually collapse for quite a while. I mean, as you can see here, there was enough time to get the fire trucks there and start spraying, and the building still hadn't collapsed. There was actually a hole there. Here was the hole. The wings, the official story is that the wings folded back on themselves. Probably like Eddie the Eagle, So the wings folded back on themselves. Now, forgive me, but the power units for this plane were on the wings. So if anything, it would have been the engines that plowed into the building. It should have drilled 2 holes into the building. And they should have been the holes that drilled right through, as opposed to the fuselage, which in theory is the weakest part of the plane, and should have just crumpled. But, hey, we're told that this was a Boeing. This is the wreckage. This is the official picture that tells everybody that a plane crashed into the Pentagon. Right. Hardened steel, just disintegrated. Here's the shot about 25, 30 minutes later, when the roof of the building had indeed collapsed. And you can see still not a mark on the lawn at all. Let's, later on in the afternoon, people were being pulled out of the earthquake in Haiti after 3 weeks. Donald Rumsfeld ordered the demolition of the Pentagon at 4:30 in the afternoon on 9/11, stating that nobody could have survived. What did he know? What did he know indeed? And of course, here we have, the fire that you saw back there was so strong that it left this book untouched on a stool there. Really quite remarkable. History cannot be permanently falsified, but we're going to have a damn good try. Now, I've actually taken a look at the witness statements from around the Pentagon on the morning. And I've actually come to a conclusion that I think I can explain what probably happened. Because here is the official trajectory of the plane, and it dropped 4,000 feet as it turned like this. Now, Boeing pilots have said this maneuver is impossible. The G-force would have effectively either broken up the plane, but even assuming that the plane had survived, the pilot would have lost consciousness because of the massive G-force in dropping the plane with phenomenal accuracy. And what you've got to remember is these guys couldn't even fly Cessnas, but dropping the plane with phenomenal accuracy and drilling it into the Pentagon. Now, just behind the Pentagon, on the Potomac River here, is Ronald Reagan International Airport. Now, looking at the witness statements, what seems to strike me is that the people who were close up to the Pentagon all say things like what hit the Pentagon was a missile, a warplane, a fighter plane, a commuter plane. They all basically say that it was a small airborne vehicle that went into the Pentagon. But the people who were further away, the people who were sort of back here on the freeway coming into Washington that day and over here, all say they saw a plane, what looked like a United Airlines plane. Well, this is what I think occurred, and this has also been corroborated by a young guy at Oxford University who managed to get hold of the software for the black box. Now, they didn't actually provide him with the coding, but he was able to get that and work it out for himself. And he's actually established that from the official black box, the plane that hit the Pentagon was actually too high. It had to have flown over the Pentagon. So what I think happened is this, that a plane was on this trajectory. There it is, right? And the missile was perfectly timed to come in under that plane so that this happened. So the plane coming in to Ronald Reagan International Airport flew over the Pentagon at exactly the same moment as the missile slammed into the Pentagon, thus creating the illusion to anybody who was more than probably a couple hundred yards away that a plane had gone into the Pentagon. I mean, consider this is like what happens in films, isn't it? The plane crash. You don't actually see the plane crash. You see the plane coming down, it flies behind the sand dune, and you see a ball of flame. And your mind does the rest. Well, that, I think, is what occurred here. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. The coordination here was absolutely staggering. This is from USA Today, which I think was a couple of days later. And this was, of course, the propaganda telling everybody what occurred. And you can see here that basically in this schematic, they're saying that the plane drilled this hole through three parts of the Pentagon. And I love this, don't you? FBI agents conducted evidence sweeps in this area and picked up debris. Yeah, we saw the debris they picked up. They found only small parts of the fuselage from the Boeing 757. The black boxes from Flight 77 may have been found in this area. Total conjecture. But it's great propaganda because that's what the gullible masses will believe. I'm going to share some extracts from a document, and I will ask if any of you recognize the extracts or the document when I come to the end of the presentation, because these are extremely telling. This is from the document. It says, "An illusion. It will be so large, so vast, it will escape their perception. Those who will see of it will be thought of as insane." Now, some of you may be aware that there was a lady in northern New Zealand who was so incensed by 9/11, she did her own research, and she decided to do what many of us have done, which is to take her research out and share it with the wider public. So she was in Whangarei in New Zealand. I think that's how you pronounce it. And how'd you say it? Whangarei, yeah, that'll work. And so she gave this presentation. She advertised that she was going to give a presentation on 9/11, and she was arrested and sectioned. And she spent 5 days in a mental institution because she questioned the official version of 9/11. Well, she got 5 days before she'd even managed to give a single presentation. So on that basis, I'm due about 4 years. Those who will see it will be thought of as insane. The truth will be hidden in their face, so close they will not be able to focus on it until it is too late. Oh yes, so grand the illusion of freedom will be that they will never know that they are our slaves. When all is in place, the reality we will have created for them will own them. This reality will be their prison. They will live in self-delusion. When our goal is accomplished, a new era of domination will begin. The domination is spreading. I mean, I'm just going to select some of the examples. Of course, you all know there's many more. Blair lied and misled the cabinet on the Iraq war. No shit. You know, wasn't there 3 million people who hit the streets because they knew that right from the outset? But, you know, this guy was so brazen that, you know, he just said, you know, these people hit the streets. Look, they're all going to go home. You know, it's a Saturday. They all feel good because they've come down to London. They've had a great day out. But, you know, they're going to go home and they're going to go back to work on Monday. All I've got to do is get through the weekend. You know, we have to learn to make our presence felt in this country like they do in South Korea in particular. You know, when the South Korean government tried to import growth hormone-contaminated beef a few years ago, the people hit the streets of Seoul and refused to go home. And 3 days later, the number of people in Seoul had doubled. A few days later, it had trebled. And in the end, the South Korean government went back to the World Trade Organization and said, what do you expect us to do? You're crippling our country. And the people actually managed to prevent growth hormone-contaminated beef coming into South Korea. But this is how the people have to react to regain the power. Protesting, you know, going down to London for a Saturday morning makes you feel good, but it's totally ineffectual. You know, Claire Short, of course, I mean, you know, at the end of the day, she protected her own skin. You know, so it's all very well for her to say Blair misled us, then took the UK into an illegal war to its eternal shame. She knew it. And she was about to resign from the cabinet, but Blair managed to sweet-talk her with the promise of a cabinet position. You know, if there was one real hero in this sequence of events, it was this guy. And he paid the price. You know, we still don't know who it was up that mountain with him. You know, who made the phone call? Because that's where this guy should be. But as we know, anybody who really raises their head above the parapet and is deemed as a threat pays the ultimate price. And of course, at AV3, we had Norman Baker talking about Dr. David Kelly. You know, this was brilliant. You know, the guy is an actor. He's way better than Obama because he learns his scripts. Obama can't function without the autocue. You know, this guy is good. He's very good. He fits the bill as described by Brian Gerrish on Saturday morning to an absolute T. And of course, not only did he use the opportunity to defend himself about invading Iraq, he used the opportunity to say, and next we need to go into Iran. You know, I mean, this guy has basically committed every offense that we were hanging people for at Nuremberg. This is aggressive warfare. You know, and I hope one day that this guy, I'm not suggesting for one moment he pays that kind of price, but I mean, he basically needs to see out the rest of his days incarcerated somewhere. You know, and this is Quentin Letts, messianic yet mellifluous, baron bellicose, the war guy in a beautiful suit. You know? just because he's not wearing a Mao suit or an Arabic scarf on his head. We say, no, this guy wouldn't do that. I mean, there was a headline in the papers a few weeks ago, I think it was maybe in early February, and the headline was, "Unleash Hell." And it was about the new attacks in the Helmand province. I thought, unleash hell, this is unbelievable. I mean, what if that was the other way around? What would the reaction be if it was put in the papers that the Afghani press or the Iraqi press had run, or the Palestinians had run a headline that said, "Unleash hell"? So it's okay for us to do it, but not for them. Touch of duplicity here, I perceive. But let's take another look at another quote from that document, because this is really quite interesting. "We will make them kill each other when it suits us. We will keep them separated from the oneness by dogma and religion. We will control all aspects of their lives and tell them what to think and how. We will guide them kindly and gently, letting them think they are guiding themselves. We will foment animosity between them through our factions." And to gasps from the gallery, Blair said we should be proud of the war. And by the way, we're ready to attack Iran because we've got the buggers surrounded. Ahmadinejad is regarded in Iran, by a lot of people as a hero, simply for keeping the US at bay. And I think I've mentioned before, once or twice, that the axis of evil, the countries that are regarded as part of the axis of evil, all have one thing in common. They are all free of debt from the World Bank. You control the people by getting them in, as I was explaining to somebody earlier today. Do you know what the translation of mortgage is? Death grip. Death grip. That's how you control the people, by debt. Everything that's occurred in the last few years has been about, the last 12 years, has been about getting people into debt. And this is about getting countries into debt. Look at what happened to Dubai. That was orchestrated. A few years ago, Sheikh Mohammed Al Maktoum looked as though he had a really good game plan, until he was persuaded to get involved in bullshit projects like building islands off the coast and making it look like a map of the world and a palm tree. Okay, thanks. We will recruit some of their own to carry out our plans. We will promise them eternal life, but eternal life they will never have, for they are not of us. The recruits will be called initiates and will be indoctrinated to believe false rites of passage to higher realms. Members of these groups will think they are one with us, never knowing the truth. They must never learn this truth, for they will turn against us. For their work, they will be rewarded with earthly things and great titles, but never will they become immortal and join us. Never will they receive the light and travel the stars. They will never reach the higher realms, for the killing of their own kind will prevent passage to the realm of enlightenment. This they will never know. So when you see in the media that Blair has raked in 20 million since leaving office, he is your archetypal capo. He is the guy who is used to control the masses, but he's not part of the inner sanctum. He is total ego-driven. It's the ego sociopsychopath. And then we see, this breakdown. I mean, I introduced this because this is from today's media, and of course, everything we've just heard from Robert Greene, and I've introduced in previous talks, some documentation that's come out of Germany and is still available in Switzerland, which effectively encourages incestuous paedophilia. What we're doing here is we're desensitizing our youth by introducing them to, as you see here, families hit by BBC filth. It's just completely outrageous. This is inside. Children as young as 5 are watching horrific post-watershed TV scenes of sex and violence at the click of a button because it's on iPlayer. I mean, is it any wonder that we've got young men of 18, 19 who go to work, they go into a hangar and they sit in a chair with a couple of joysticks and they're flying unmanned drones around Pakistan and annihilating their enemies. And to them, it's just like playing an Xbox game at home. It's completely desensitizing our youth. And it's the youth that we need to really think about protecting, not ourselves. You know, I mean, these guys aren't actually worried about us, other than the fact that we might just wake a few people up. They're not actually worried about us. The real target is the youth. We will focus their attention towards money and material goods so that they may never connect with their inner self. We will distract them with fornication. Now, this is a very interesting word, fornication, because fornication does not mean sex. Fornication means sex between species. That is the etymological background. External pleasures and games so that they may never be one with the oneness of it all. Their minds will belong to us and they will do as we say. If they refuse, we shall find ways to implement mind-altering technology into their lives. We will use fear as our weapon. Does any of this ring true? Funny, that. Now, over the next few weeks and months, we are going to see the real shit hit the fan. If anybody thinks there's been a financial meltdown, you ain't seen nothing yet. If anybody does have disposable or liquid assets, look very, very carefully at what you do with them. Because there is a game plan to completely decimate the financial independence of, let's say, the middle classes, but the financial independence of anybody. This is going to be caused either through massive inflation, maybe starting in the US, and then quickly following into Europe. All the signs are there. All the signs are there. I mean, we've got foreclosures in the US running at 25, 30% in some parts. There's tent cities in most of the major cities in the US, to say nothing of the likes of Detroit, which has just become an industrial wasteland. You know, the crash is coming. Look at commodities. You know, look at moving. If you have any liquidity, look at moving it into something that can survive, can traditionally survive this kind of meltdown. What is happening is going to lead to violence on the streets. It's already happening in countries. It's already happening in Greece. I don't really understand. Of course, it was happening in Iceland. I don't really understand yet why it isn't happening in places like Ireland, Italy, Portugal, and Spain, because those countries are also on the brink of total collapse, financial collapse, and Britain isn't far behind. Actually, what is happening right now is the true magnitude of the state of financial play in this country is being deliberately hidden, just as it was in Greece by Lehman Brothers, just as it was in Greece. Sorry, it was Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs were manipulating the Greece budget. They'll suppress it here until the election. And after the election, all hell will break loose. Now, they might manage to suppress it for a few weeks through the summer. If it hasn't happened by the end of the summer, the real period of risk is going to be between mid-September and mid-November. But I cannot see, and I'm not the only one, by the way, I cannot see really any way in which the global economy can be propped up beyond that. Now, when this happens, let me tell you, this is not for us to get involved, okay? I mean, that has to be clearly understood. This is not for us. This is going to be the reaction of the people who have no awareness, who have no insight into what's occurring, because they are going to go through the anger and the fear, because not only are they going to have no money, because the banks are going to close. I mean, by the way, it's already been announced in the US. Citibank have sent letters out to all of their customers stating that there may, in the future, be occasion where the bank needs to close its doors for up to 7 days. and it just leaves the people to decide what it is they want to do about that. But this may well be the reaction, because obviously we're going to see a meltdown in terms of the employment market, so people aren't going to have employment, and they're not going to have access to funds because of bank meltdown. They're going to find it very difficult to get food. So this, unfortunately, has to happen. This is part of the alchemical process. It's solve et coagular. You have to destroy to be able to rebuild. And it's an unfortunate fact of life that but in the microcosm, we learn way more when we go through personal trauma. And each time we go through personal trauma, it's like an initiation. We have to embody it, we have to embrace it, we have to work our way through it, we have to channel that energy. And then, like the phoenix, we have to build, from that new foundation. We will focus their attention toward money and material goods that they may never connect with their inner self. There has never been probably a time in known history when it's been more important for us to identify with this and to do whatever it is that we need to do to make that reconnect with our inner self, with our higher self. We've got to step through the emotion of what's occurring here and start to look at things perhaps on a much deeper level. And I'm going to bring this to a conclusion in a second, but this is the document, the Secret Covenant. Now, I've only quoted little pieces of it. We have no idea of the true origins of this document. And like the Protocols of Zion, it has been dismissed as a forgery. But it is extremely prescient. And this appeared out of the blue on this website, bankindex.com, on the 21st of June, 2002. Less than 1 year after 9/11. After the invasion of Afghanistan, but before the invasion of Iraq. Go Google the Secret Covenant. Go read it. It's part of a script. If it is a forgery, it's a bloody good one, and it's extremely prescient. Now, you remember when I opened the conference on Friday, and I introduced the Daily Express, and the article that appeared on the front page of the Daily Express, the new EU Gestapo spies on Britons. And a couple of quotes that I want to point out to you. The EU police force. This could include covert monitoring of people who deny the existence of climate change and speak out on controversial issues. So I'm f***ed. But you know what? F*** them. But you know what I'm working on? I'm working on what I think is a pretty sound philosophy. I'm working on the basis that these guys need to wrap me and others in cotton wool. I should have a bloody escort. Because even if I meet with the most unfortunate accident, nobody's going to believe it. And my DVDs are going to sell better than Elvis records. And I'm reliant on you to make that happen. But I have no plans. But let's take a look at a couple of other examples here. Because it says, there is a real danger, this is a quote from Sean Gadd from the Libertarian Society. He says, there's a real danger that opposition to EU policies could make an individual liable to arrest. For example, get this, if Brussels adopts a hardline stance on climate change, it's conceivable that someone who broadcasts their skepticism of climate change may be accused of committing an environmental crime because they have undermined the EU's efforts to save mankind. I mean, never in my wildest dreams did I believe or think that I would ever see this kind of crap in the British media. And we still think we live in a free society. Come on. We are now on the threshold of a totalitarian state. But what gives me tremendous confidence is, just like at AV3, we were still talking about, the climate change and how outrageous it was that the agenda was being promoted. What happened 2 weeks later? The East Anglia emails were released, and Copenhagen was totally undermined. So, we are getting a lot of help. This is a quote. It's often attributed, actually, to Abraham Lincoln. But I think the origins of it go back to Edmund Burke, who was a philosopher of the 18th century. He said, "Those who don't know history are destined to repeat it." So the onus is on us to actually revisit what we thought we knew about history and actually get through the bullshit, through the official version of events, which, by the way, the US are trying to change because they've introduced legislation that all children's books printed pre-1986 have to be destroyed. I kid you not. And the reason is because the ink that was used when they were printed contains lead. So they have decreed in the US that all children's books in libraries, school libraries, homes, printed pre-1986 have to be destroyed. This is the sort of 21st century equivalent of the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. Unbelievable. I started the presentation with a quote that Steiner used in The Karma of Untruthfulness, and here's another quote that he made in a series of presentations that he gave, I think, between about 1909 and 1913. And he said, "He who would create the new must be able to endure the passing of the old in full tranquility." And I ask you to reflect on that. Because what that means is that we have to get beyond any kind of emotional attachment to the crap that's about to occur. We've got to be able to elevate ourselves beyond that and see that what's occurring is going to occur for a very good reason. Just the same as when, trauma occurs in our lives, our personal lives, we have to get through the wounded child phase, the victim phase, and recognize that actually it's occurring for a reason, because something is dead, needs to be swept away, and then we need to go through the initiation and get on to whatever the next level is. And that's exactly what is occurring right here. So, 11/11 has a very great significance to many people. Not least, perhaps, because the moment of the winter solstice in December 21st, 2012, occurs at exactly 11/11. And that's according to the United States Naval Observatory. So it's definitely time to wake up. And I will expand much more on the final statement at a future AV event. It's time to wake up and dream the future. Okay, now I'm going to close with something that was put on the board outside. Some of you may have read it, but many of you won't. But I think this is very powerful, and I want to share it with you. I have no idea who wrote it. I think it says Dan, but that might not be the case. But I want to share this with you, and I hope you appreciate why. It's called "Who is to Blame?" We are the starving, the meek, and the poor. We are the victims of your conflicts and wars. We are the people struck down with the AIDS, a hidden surprise in the vaccines you gave. We are the children who die 10 a penny, casualties of progress for your world of plenty. We are the homeless you step over in the street. I'm the crazy ranting lady whose eyes you won't meet. We are the youth, disenchanted and angry, with asbos and hoodies and a disengaged family. We are the natives whose water you soured, whose trees you cut down and land you devoured. We are the people displaced from our lands because laws can be broken for a corporation so grand. We are the creed, an entire race you're erasing. with your illegal bombs filled with depleted uranium. But these weapons aren't selective. Yes, you're killing yourselves or your soldiers, their wives and their children as well. Because we are the cancer that plagues your society. With diabetes and infertility, we gain notoriety. We are the workers whose jobs are all lost because the Chinese can do it for a far lesser cost. We are the victims of your financial crash. Homes taken, bankrupted, left scratching for cash. We are the people who bailed out the banks. Are they ours? Do we own them? Do we get any thanks? No. They continue to screw us and charge for the service. IMF, the World Bank, they have a sinister purpose. We're not pointing the finger or passing the blame. We don't want your guilt, your pity, or your shame. We don't want your money you're so eager to lend because we won't be indebted or slaved to your trends. We just want a playing field that's level and fair, to know the rules of the game and to have an equal share. We just want the freedom to live our lives as we please, to run our own country and to fish our own seas. So we'll print our own money and we'll choose our own leaders and we'll no longer stand for the bullshit they feed us. We'll grow our own food and make our own diesel and have no further dealings with your corporate evil. We'll take back what's ours, the banks and the trains, power companies, the roads, no more corporate gains. Your time, it's nearing through our struggles and pains because we, the people, we're tired of your games. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Ian Crane.